Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to another live stream. It's Danny Dhaiphong, and as you can see, I am joined by Scott Ritter, former UN Marine Corps officer. He's also a former UN weapons inspector and one of the most favored geopolitical analysts out there today and journalists. Scott Ritter, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Yourself?
I am doing all right. I am doing okay. So there's been a lot going on, so maybe we can just get started first. You've been in the realm of intelligence, Scott. I wanted your take on a very curious intelligence assessment. Here is let me just pull up the CNN report on it, that Russia has lost 87% of its troops that it had prior to the start of Ukraine's war, according to the intelligence assessment. And quickly, it just says that a staggering 87% of the total number of active duty ground troops that Russia had prior to launching the Ukraine war and 2/3 of its pre-invasion tanks are gone. A source familiar with the declassified U.S. intelligence assessment to Congress told CNN. And then it said, still, despite heavy losses of men and equipment, Russian President Vladimir Putin is determined to push forward as the war approaches the 2-year anniversary next year. And U.S. officials are warning that Ukraine remains deeply vulnerable as the counteroffensive stagnated last fall, and officials believe Kiev is unlikely to make any gains in the future. So quite a contradictory statement there, Scott, from your experience on this, in this realm, and just your analysis of this. What's your take on the latest intelligence assessment of the battlefield situation?
Well, we also need to add in that this Russian army that's been, decimated. Worse. I mean, it's worse than decimated. Decimated is just 1 in 10. I mean, this army's been annihilated. If you remember, is going to be pushing through Ukraine and onto Poland and the Baltics, and potentially causing World War III because they're so badass. Look, this is stupid in the extreme. Let's look at the timing of it. First of all, what are we talking about? We're talking about an intelligence report prepared for Congress. Why is Congress being briefed on this Russian, the state of the Russian military at this time? I mean, it's okay. Congress should be briefed all the time, but at this particular time, what's going on? What could the possible linkage be that would cause Congress to be briefed by the intelligence community? Oh, could it be that Congress is being asked by the President of the United States to authorize the release of $60 billion of U.S. taxpayer funds to further Ukraine's war effort against Russia? Now, at a time when the president is saying that, if we don't give this money to Ukraine, the Russians are going to go on to Poland and the Baltics and World War III. Your uncles, brothers, cousins, sisters, mothers are going to be fighting and dying if we don't let the Ukrainians fight and die for us. You know, many in Congress are questioning this. I mean, there are some in Congress have turned this into this issue of releasing money into a political football, basically saying, "Hey, Joe, if you want us to take care of Ukraine, you got to take care of America first. You got to release money and redo your policy on the border." So there's an element of politics there. But if you look at Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House, and what he had to say too, is it was interesting because now the third most powerful person in America, number 3 in the line of succession to the presidency, has said that if you want this money, there's going to have to be some sort of oversight, meaning we want to know where it's going. We're not just going to give it to Ukraine anymore. We need to follow the money and make sure we know how it's spent and who's getting it, etc. And he said, we also need the Ukrainians to give us a plan of action. Okay, so we give you this money. What are you going to do? What are you going to do that's different than what you've already done with the 115 billion we've already given you? And if you can't do that, I don't know why we should give you this money. And so one way to answer the question about what are you going to do with this money is the Biden administration's trying to make the argument that, and it's an argument you've heard others make very callously. This is the best investment you've ever had, guys. We're putting money into Ukrainians' hands, and they're killing Russians. They're killing a lot of Russians. So, and we don't have to. We're not losing any Americans. The Ukrainians are killing a lot of Russians. They're destroying a lot of Russian tanks. This is a great investment. I feel like I'm back in the Wild Wild West, and the snake oil salesman has shown up. And for all your ailments, here's Doc Smith's liniment. Put it on, and it'll all feel better. That's what Biden's doing. Give them the money, and everything will be okay. But so the timing, we know that this is a political assessment. Now, I haven't gone to the obvious conclusion of a politicized assessment, but we can admit right up front, this is a political assessment. It's been released by the executive branch, which is the ones authorized to make this happen, to Congress, the legislative branch, for a political purpose, to create the conditions for the freeing of $60 billion. So it's a political assessment. Now let's look at the assessment itself. I will just say, to cut to the chase here, there's not a military professional, and I have to underscore the term professional, who believes this assessment. It's just ludicrous in the extreme. It's stupid. It's so stupid as to be insulting. The probability of kill factors alone. I mean, how do you kill a Russian soldier? Let's just get into that. How does it happen? Because especially when the Russians are trying to kill you at the same time. So you bring up artillery. I want to fire an artillery shell downrange because artillery is the number one killer on the battlefield right now. Fire a round downrange, bam, and kill me some Russians. Meanwhile, the Russians, for every round I'm firing downrange at them, are firing, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rounds at me. Now, we can just go ahead and give ourselves credit for having really good artillery. I mean, we'll call them magic artillery shells. Every time we fire a round, it goes downrange and it kills something. It doesn't. Usually you fire a lot of artillery shells to kill something, but we'll just give them credit for magic artillery shells. Fire, kill. Let's say you fire and you kill one of theirs. Okay, bam, boom. Oh no, now they only have 7 artillery rounds back. They fire 7 at us. One of them's going to hit me and kill me. So I'm dead now. And that's going to be replicated down the whole battle. Just the ability to mass fires alone puts the probability of kill correlation overwhelmingly on the side of the Russians. So the Russians are positioned just by the superiority of their sizes and numbers to kill more Ukrainians than the Ukrainians are positioned to kill us. And we can take this to every extreme you want, but it even gets better because the Ukrainian Air Force is virtually non-existent. They pop up a couple airplanes here now and then. They fire some bombs and all of a sudden they kill Russians. Of course they kill Russians. But the Russian Air Force is everywhere, slaughtering the Ukrainians, slaughtering them. And it just goes on and on and on and on. The Russians are on the defensive. Now that's important because normally when you attack, you want a 3-to-1 advantage when you go forward to the attack, because the advantage is normally with the defender. So you need more attackers than defenders. So you'd expect the Ukrainians to be losing more. And that's if everything's going well. But the Ukrainians have admitted that nothing went well on this counteroffensive. Everything went wrong. Minefields, they got bogged down. So all the things on the battlefield that are supposed to be killing Russians ain't killing Russians. They're being killed by Russians. What I'm trying to say is this is impossible, what they're saying. It's a literal physical impossibility to have what they say happened to the Russians. It hasn't happened. It's the evidence is overwhelming that this is a BS made up assessment. Now, how would this happen? Well, gosh, I don't know. First of all, is it possible that U.S. intelligence could be politicized like this? I don't know, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Don't we remember when a president, George W. Bush, through his administration, gave the U.S. intelligence community the orders to fix the intelligence around the policy, meaning we want to invade Iraq. We're going to use as the excuse weapons of mass destruction. Find me some weapons, baby. And the U.S. intelligence community went, oh, yeah, sure. What the hell? We'll look at everything and go, oh, that looks like a weapon. That could be 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 a weapon. Here, we have weapons. There weren't any weapons. And they knew there weren't any weapons, but they were fixing the intelligence, cherry picking this data, this data, this data, this data, this data. When you do battle damage assessment, I have a little bit of experience in this. Let me give you an example of how that battle damage can be spun in a way that isn't a bold-faced lie, because I'd like to believe that while intelligence can be politicized, that your basic analyst isn't an inherent liar. But what they do want to do is please the boss. Now, during the Gulf War, the one that I was involved in, one aspect that I was involved in was counter-Scud operations. That means that we're looking for the Iraqi Scud missile launchers, mobile missile launchers, before they fire their missiles at Israel or at the Gulf Arab states, and then we want to destroy them. And somewhere around week 2 of the air war, I noticed something, because the intelligence said that the Iraqis had 19 mobile launchers. That was the pre-war intelligence, pretty accurate, because they had 19. Wow. So, and week 2, I'm going through all the battle damage reports of pilots who were flying over Iraq at great risk. Some of them are shot down, so, some are killed, made prisoner. These it's a war. These aren't cowards. They're out there trying to do a job, and they've reported they've killed 64 mobile missile launchers. And I'm like, can't be. Physically can't be. 19. If you've killed all 19, that would be 19, but you've killed 64. But they're still firing them. Missiles are being fired 6 at a time, 5 at a time. So that implies if they're firing 6 at a time and you've killed 64, there must have been 70 launchers, but there's no evidence of this. Even if we give them credit for having an indigenous launcher program, that would be another 10, a dozen launchers, not 64. So something's going on. We're hitting something that we think is a missile launcher, but it ain't a missile launcher. That happens all the time. Pilot reports are notoriously inflated. The same thing with you're firing artillery downrange. I mean, do you really have eyes on target? No. You might have a drone up there. And so you see 10 guys running and you fire artillery rounds. It goes boom, 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 boom. And 10 guys aren't running. We killed all 10. No, they're on the ground, down, moving, not being killed. You didn't kill anybody. That's the reality. So, but these reports are coming in that are inflated. They're inflated by people who think they did something. So now the Ukrainians are out there and they're submitting their reports. Or you have guys on satellites who are counting things. And one of the things we did in the war is, because you can't count everybody because it's impossible, what you do is you say, if we drop, say, for every 1 ton of bombs we drop, we assume that we killed X number of troops and X number of tanks. So now it becomes, a simple mathematical problem. How many artillery shells did you fire? We fired 7,000. What's the table say? We should have killed, 400 men and 20 tanks. Fired 7,000 rounds, killed 400 men, 70 tanks. Goes down, boom, boom. Also, all this data is out there. It's crap data. It's BS. And now you have an analyst who knows it's crap data. It's BS. But the boss says, we need to show that the money we're sending to Ukraine is resulting in dead Russians. So the analyst goes through and he says, well, if I cherry pick all the intelligence reports that say we killed all this stuff, wow, we have an 87% success rate. We've killed 87% of the Russian army. We're really good. No, we're really bad. And this is the fact. The Russians, let me say it this way. The Russians started the conflict with around 220,000 troops in the general area going into Ukraine. Since that time, they've mobilized 300,000 and they've received around 450,000 volunteers. So that's 750 plus 2, about 950,000 troops. Of this 950,000 troops that have been employed in the zone, you have some rotation as well. Some conscripts that are rotating in, some contract soldiers that are coming in from everywhere. About 1.2 million Russians have rotated through and are serving in the special military operation zone. Of this, we can say that the number of dead is around 50,000 dead. That's a fair assessment. And the number of wounded is around 150,000. So that's 200,000 out of 1.2 million. That's a lot of guys, first of all. Let's understand it, that the idea that Russia's not taking losses, not taking hits on this one is absurd in the extreme. This is a very, very bloody war. 50,000 dead, 150,000 wounded is a fair assessment. I would call it a liberal assessment, meaning that I'm giving the Ukrainians more credit than maybe they deserve. The number could be less, but it's not going to be more than this. So that's a fair number. Now, when they say 87%, they're talking about casualties. They're talking about dead and wounded. So their numbers, what that would put it at 87% of 320,000. So they're talking about roughly, I'm not a good mathematician, but around 300,000. So to be frank, their numbers are off by about 100,000. That shows you, how intelligence can be inflated here, there, and everything. 100,000. But that's not the point. They're saying of the original forces in. I'm giving you numbers that include the Donetsk militia, the Lugansk militia, Wagner, volunteer units that fall out, units belonging to the Ministry of Interior or the Russian National Guard, units that fall outside of the Ministry of Defense, the Russian army per se. I'm giving you total figures. What they're talking about is of the Russian army, the 300 and some odd thousand that were available at the time. Those are the casualties. So their numbers are highly inflated with a very select, pool of data. I'm going expansive data, everything, and the numbers are there. So you can't directly correlate these numbers. On tanks, understand this. You can take a tank out, but if you don't remove that tank and give it to the Ukrainians, what tends to happen is the Russians recover the carcass and repair it and put it back in. They have these repair and restoration units right there at the battlefield that are taking these things in. If they can repair them right there, they do. And they're very effective. They'll get a destroyed tank in there and they will replace an engine. They will replace a sprocket. They will do what they need to do, rewire it, and bam, it's back out into the battlefield to be used again. Tanks that are really badly destroyed go back to the manufacturer where they remanufacture it. And I've seen the photographs of the tanks coming in, and I've seen the photographs of the tanks coming out. The tanks coming out look like they're brand new tanks off the assembly line. So is it possible that the Russians, lost 2,000 tanks? Yeah, it's possible. This is a war. This is a modern war. Is it possible they lost 2,000 tanks irretrievably? Hell no. Of those 2,000 tanks they lost, the vast majority of those tanks, and I would say over 1,500, 1,700, had been repaired and put back into combat. And in addition to that happening, Russia has been manufacturing brand new tanks. So the notion that Russia's running out of tanks is stupid. Again, the ignorance of this intelligence assessment, where I can't accuse the analyst of making up a report. What I can accuse him of, and I am, and I'm accusing his mid-level management and the senior level management, is knowing that the numbers they're putting there are not good numbers, that it's cherry picked, which makes this a fabricated intelligence report, not worth the paper it's written on. But it was done specifically to give to Congress so that Congress could leak it to CNN. Remember, early on in the war, where we had the head of the National Security Agency say, yeah, we're releasing intelligence straight to CNN so we can manipulate public opinion. Jake Sullivan bragged, yeah, we're declassifying intelligence so it can get out there. Even if we know it's wrong, we're doing it because we want to shape public opinion. It's part of the war effort. So that's what's happening here. This intelligence report was written for the purpose of being released to influence public opinion so that we can make phone calls to our congressmen so that they will release $60 billion. And if the idea of the U.S. intelligence community lying directly to the American people, that is lying to our representatives for the purpose of them deceiving us, doesn't upset you, I don't think anything will, because that's what this is. This is a bald-faced lie by the U.S. intelligence community on behalf of the President of the United States to Congress to deceive the American people so that we can greenlight Congress releasing $60 billion to Ukraine.
Indeed. And I'm just wondering about the effectiveness of this, because you mentioned that, this is on behalf of the Biden administration, of Joe Biden. This is an attempt to sell the war, to ensure that this huge amount of money is going to pour in. But then you also have the fact, like here, during Zelensky's visit, even Joe Biden, well, we know that Joe Biden has a lot of troubles when it comes to saying the right thing or keeping it together. But even here, you see this kind of comports with what's been going on over the last several months in the Western mainstream media, the U.S. mainstream media, and the entire political class in Washington. A lot of them have been saying things aren't really going well, perhaps, and that's why there's this gridlock on the money. But even Joe Biden couldn't help but say a shift in the rhetoric, where instead of as long as it takes, supporting Ukraine as long as it takes, now he's saying as long as we can. That's quite the change. And I wonder if you'd like to comment on that and what is precipitating this contradiction between trying to sell this war as a huge success in some respects, while on the other hand, continuing to indicate that it's far from it.
Well, I think one of the things that's happening too is there's this political gamesmanship being played by Biden, trying to shame Congress into releasing this money. Because I mean, there is a difference, I would think, between we're with you till the end, and suddenly it's, well, we're with you as long as we can be with you, but we're not with you till the end. The end might be tomorrow because Congress is not releasing the money. So this is part of the political gamesmanship being played by the president to create the concept of the inevitability of disaster. It should Congress not release this money. So the president is just saying, we're with you as long as we can be, but my hands are tied because Congress isn't releasing this money. This is also part of the Biden administration's, political posturing. We're in the presidential silly season right now. We are less than a year away from the great 2024 election. And so it's just going to get silly, as it always does. But here it's going to get even more silly because of the deep political divides that exist in the United States between Republicans and Democrats. Biden has tied his horse to, the Ukraine wagon. And he's supposed to be along for the ride. We just found out that he's not. He's going to cut that horse loose as soon as he can. But how does he explain this to the American people? He's already going to have to explain that. Oh, no, he's not going to have to explain Afghanistan. I'm sorry, because nobody cares about Afghanistan. Nobody's talking about Afghanistan. Everybody's forgotten about Afghanistan. Literally, everybody's forgotten that in August of 2021, America got its butt kicked by a bunch of Taliban that we thought we had defeated, who had come back and they threw us out of Afghanistan. That's supposed to be the kind of disaster that causes, presidencies to collapse, to fail. But no, he got us right back into another adventure in Ukraine. And now that's collapsing and failing. I mean, the American people apparently have no memory. We have no conscience. We don't stand for anything. We're easily fooled, because what Biden's seeking to do right now is to get us all to forget that he once said, we're with you till the end, that this is about American freedom. This is about democracy. This is about defending our way of life. This is an existential struggle. If we let Putin win, it's all over, guys. And now, well, guess what? Putin won. It's all over. But it's not my fault. It was Congress's fault. They didn't release the $60 billion. Had they simply done what I asked them to do, we wouldn't be in this problem. But it's not a big deal anyways, because it's just Ukraine. It's not a big deal. It's just Ukraine. Don't worry about it. We've got NATO, our God-given right. It's a sacred obligation to defend NATO. But, don't worry about Ukraine. We're just, what, Ukraine? Where is that on the map? Why are you saying Ukraine? Afghanistan? We don't know. That's what's going on right now. We're starting to create the conditions where the president is trying to de-link his administration from this problem that he created. Zelensky is a problem created by the United States of America. We're the ones who took this failed politician and we elevated him into the new Winston Churchill. Hell, we brought him into the People's House, where he gave, you remember, the best speech in the history of the United States Congress. That's how good Zelensky is. He gave the best speech in the history of the United States Congress. I mean, this man was magic. He was Time Magazine's Man of the Year last year. I mean, he could do no wrong. He was the golden child. He was the best thing in the world. He's been replaced by Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I was about to say, supplanted by Taylor Swift.
Love story, baby. So it's a love story. But nobody's talking about this guy. Nobody cares about the guy. Did you see the video he made? I mean, there's a video running around where he's speaking directly to the American people, and he's basically asking us to stop repairing roads and doing anything for a day and give the money to Ukraine so he can fund everything. And it's in this ridiculous, stupid accent. Don't repair potholes for a day and give me the money so I can pay my people, my pensions. We can do this, but for a day, don't spend the money on you. Spend it on me. Like, come on. This is what he's reduced to. He wouldn't have to do that kind of stuff. He just had to show up and give some sort of lie. His Oscar acceptance speech, repeated over and over again to Parliament, to Congress, to President, to everybody. And money just flowed like the river. Not anymore. Nope. He can't. Now, he's out, talking directly to the American people as if, hey, Zelensky, let me just give you a professional tip. Don't ask the American people not to repair potholes. You see, we are a nation that likes to drive cars. And if you want to really piss us off, have a pothole in my street. You want to get my attention as a voter as I'm driving to work and pop, pop, that pisses me off. So my politicians stay in office by repairing potholes. Okay, so ask us to do anything but not repair the potholes. That's just how separated this man is from reality. But it's ridiculous what this guy has come down to. He's a cartoon character that has lost all utility. He was nothing more than a tool to serve as a vehicle, a conduit through which we could justify sending all this money to Ukraine. We had glorified him as a hero, but now he is a nobody. He is an anti-hero. The media's turned on him. Everybody's turned on him. It was sort of pathetic to watch even Joe Biden turn on him. I mean, in some ways, I'm sort of sorry for this guy, even though I'm not. I'm just, there's enough humanity in me to feel sorry for a guy that's been lied to and abandoned and isolated because we have betrayed him. I mean, he deserves it because his cause isn't worthy of, what we're asking the American taxpayer to fund or what he's asking the Ukrainian soldier to die for. Remember, 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died in this war. That's a lot. But I do feel sorry for him because he is being betrayed. This is the ultimate betrayal. Now we know how Ashraf Ghani felt as he walked to his helicopter with all his suitcases full of money, betrayed. So don't feel too bad for Zelensky, because he's got a lot of money stashed away. If he can get out of Ukraine alive, he'll do okay. But he has been betrayed by the United States, by Europe, by NATO.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk about his visit, because I think his visit encapsulates a lot of this. And first, perhaps we can hear Chuck Schumer, because some of the last remaining support that Zelensky has, and here's Alex Christopher with the clown emojis. I think it's of the Duran with the clown emojis. I think it's pretty apt, because the more we hear about Zelensky's visit, his recent visit to DC, the more we can only think of almost like a clown. So there's only a few that still support him, and the narrative is only getting more ridiculous. So here's what Chuck Schumer had to say.
Okay, folks, I'll be very brief. It was a very powerful meeting. President Zelensky made it so clear how he needs help. But if he gets the help, he can win this war. And he outlined in some great detail the kind of help he needs and how it will help him win. Even many of our Republican colleagues talked about we are winning this war. And if we get the help, if he gets the help he needs, he will win. On the other hand, he made it clear, and we all make it clear, that if we lose, Putin wins. And this will be very, very dangerous for the United States. We cannot let Putin influence through any surrogate what we need to do for Ukraine. He also made one other thing. He needs the aid quickly. If we don't get the aid quickly, several things will happen. First, the military needs, but second, Europe and many other allies will say, what is going on here? They're not giving the aid.
So there you go. Mr. Chuck Schumer said the Putin is going to win. He doesn't get the aid. He didn't get it. I mean, he didn't convince anybody. The Republican majority Senate, actually, even there were some who commented that it was the same old script. That there wasn't anything new, and that there were some people who walked out of the meeting. So, Scott, your reaction?
Well, first of all, what Schumer was saying is, he said Zelensky told us exactly what he needed. Please elaborate, Chuck. I'll elaborate for him. Zelensky had an amazing shopping list, because they're used to giving us shopping lists, and we respond. If you recall, General Zaluzhny gave us a shopping list last fall of the hundreds of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery pieces that he needed to win this war. And if we gave him 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces, unlimited ammunition, a whole bunch of other stuff, that he could punch a hole through the Russian lines, sever the land bridge connecting Crimea with mainland Russia, and win the war. And so we did. We gave him everything he wanted. And he didn't accomplish what he wanted. So now what they're saying is, this time we're serious. We want FA-18 fighters. We're past the F-16 now, because they know the F-16's old junk and going to get shot down. We want the good stuff, the FA-18 fighters. We want the THAAD air defense system, that big boy of air defense, the one that can shoot down all the Russian missiles in the world. We want the THAAD. And it just goes on and on and on, this ridiculous shopping list of all the modern technology. As if Zelensky woke up and just pulled out the catalog and said, what's the best stuff they got? I mean, that's like me waking up and going to the Mercedes-Benz dealership and going, what's the best one you got? That's the one I want. It'll solve all my problems if I only have that car. And so that's the shopping list he gave. It's totally unrealistic. I mean, America isn't going to give him any of that stuff. But, that shows you how stupid this is. Maybe that, if he went in high, we'd come down low. Well, Vlad, I'm glad you asked for the F-18, but this time we're really going to give you the F-16 or this. No, he's not going to get any of that, because it's so stupid. And again, it has to be attached to a plan. Because what the Ukrainians are saying is, give us all the good stuff, give us all the good toys, and we're going to win. Well, You didn't. And now you say, give us more, give us the better stuff, and we're going to win. With what plan? What plan do you have? He doesn't have a plan. They don't have a plan. They've got nothing to brief anybody right now. The United States is saying, because they don't have a plan, we need them to go on the defensive for now, and then we're going to make a plan that will have them win in 2025. The United States has written off 2024, saying it's a dead year because Ukraine got their butts kicked and there's nothing left to give them. We need them to dig in, freeze the conflict, but not Zelensky. He can't sit there and go, that's what I'll do. He wants all the new toys so he can attack now, because that's how he was programmed. That's the script that was written for him. He's an actor. He reads scripts. So this is what happens when you have a writer's strike, because the scripts used to be written by the CIA or MI6. Now he's writing his own scripts. He's one of these actors that actually believes that he is the role that was written for him. And so now he's gone off on his own. He's ad-libbing the scripts. The director wants him to do this. No. I've been playing president for 2 years, pal. Let me tell you what I'm going to say. I'm just going to ask for all the crap in the world. It's sad, actually. It's actually fairly sad. And the other thing that's happening here is Biden brought him in not so much as to cajole Congress into releasing money, because I don't think Biden really expected Congress to release money because it's too much of an ask. What happened with Congress walking away from this, Republicans, was expected, which means Biden brought Zelensky in to create political cover for Biden, to set Zelensky up for failure as a process of transferring blame away from the presidency onto Congress. And so Zelensky's visit is one last act of theater, the final act in the tragic comedy that is Volodymyr Zelensky. This guy's not long for this world. I mean, he's going back to Ukraine. His only justification for being is to be the conduit through which billions of dollars is funneled into the most corrupt country on the planet. He stays alive because all the corrupt people are enriched by his ability to attract money. But what happens in The Sopranos when you're the guy who's supposed to give the kickback to Tony and you don't give the kickback? You don't have the money. Well, somebody shows up, and that somebody, usually that long-haired dude from Italy, comes in and he kills you or he beats you up because you've lost your utility. They can't just let you walk away. You owe money. Well, Zelensky owes a lot of people money in Ukraine right now. They expect him to deliver on the goods, and he's not able to deliver on this. He's going to go back to Ukraine, and look, the Ukrainian Rada, the parliament, they're starting to disintegrate as we speak. The head of Zelensky's own party in the Rada is saying all the parliamentarians are running away. They don't want to have anything to do with the sinking ship because they're attached to this. They're going to be blamed. At some point in time, the Ukrainian people are going to be demanding heads on a pike, of the people who voted for this, facilitated this disaster, this debacle that's befallen Ukraine. And it's the Rada that are going to have their heads there alongside Zelensky. And so you see the Rada basically saying, we're out of here too. Zelensky now has political rivals who are stepping up saying, we can do a better job than you. The Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian forces, are all saying, we can do a better job than Zelensky. I think you're going to see, we're watching not just the military collapse of the Ukrainian army on the battlefield, we're watching the political collapse of the Zelensky regime. And we're probably going to see in short order, if that money doesn't come in, the societal collapse of Ukraine. Because as Zelensky said in that pathetic "don't fix your pothole" speech, they don't have any money to pay anybody. No pensions are being paid. No salaries are being paid. No firefighters are going to be paid. No soldiers are going to be paid. No civil servants are going to be paid. Nobody's going to be paid because all our money was going to paying these people. And so if they can't pay these people, they're going to stop working, and they're going to start looking to Zelensky saying, hey, we want our money. So all that money you stole, give it to us. And you're going to see a mob mentality. And, one of the ironies here is that the Ukrainians have been working with the West to get a Moscow Maidan, to repeat what happened in Kiev in 2014 against Vladimir Putin, to oust him. We're probably going to see, a Maidan 3.0 unfold in Kiev, where the Ukrainian people are going to turn on Zelensky, and they may be accompanied by the Ukrainian military, which makes Maidan 3.0 a coup d'etat. And that could get bloody. That could get ugly very quick. So, there's that old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. The Ukraine has an abundance of interesting times coming its way, because you're seeing the total collapse of Ukraine, militarily, economically, politically, societally, if that's a word.
Yeah, that's indeed what's happening. And then what do you make of the internal conflict? Because you do have Zelensky. There was reports that Zelensky told Lloyd Austin that he wanted. So it's interesting to see this internal conflict play out, because there are reports that Zelensky told Lloyd Austin that he would need X number of ammunition, artillery, and Lloyd Austin had to tell him, well, that number is about 2 to 3 times more than what exists even in the world. That he was like almost shocked that someone would even utter the amount that he was requesting. And then you also have the fact that Zelensky is still definitely playing out this role. And here he is speaking with defense company leaders, basically the biggest defense contractors. And he gave a whole soliloquy to the defense contractors that have made a killing off of the conflict in Ukraine, off of NATO's proxy war. And I'm not going to play the video because the music itself is just awful. But the point is, here you can see it's just a big kiss in the you-know-what that Zelensky's giving them. But at the same time, as it doesn't really comport with the military situation that you're talking about, or even his political situation. So what does this say about not just Zelensky's future, but also how this is aligning with the overall military situation, that he's playing this role, but the outcome is just so disastrous right now?
Well, remember that one of the arguments put forward by the Biden administration in the lead up to Zelensky's visit was, hey, all that money that we're giving Ukraine, 60% of it never leaves the country. It's just invested here at home in defense industry, which creates jobs. So, guys, this is a jobs program. We want you to release the money, and then it stays here. It's that economic, incentive you've been wanting us to do, to boost the economy. And that's what we're doing. We're funding defense industry, and there's jobs attached to that. This is good for the American economy. And, hopefully most Americans go, wait a minute. So basically, you're spending money so that the U.S. defense industry can become rich while Ukrainians die. That this isn't about outcome on the battlefield, but really just, results on the economic front here at home, which in many ways is the truth. At least they're being honest. But what Zelensky did, notice the first people he went to were the defense contractors. Why? Because he wants to make a show under the mistaken belief that if he meets with the defense contractors, they will somehow turn this jobs program into something that manifests itself politically here at home. But it fell flat. No one gives a damn. I don't think too many Americans, especially now at Christmas time, are going, you know what I want for Christmas? I want Raytheon stock prices to go up because Joe Biden released that $60 billion. And we know that 60% of that's being reinvested right here at home. I mean, the people that live in the cities and towns where these factories are probably going, please, 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 because that is a nice Christmas gift. But for the most Americans, I think, they either don't care or they're deeply resentful about what happened here. This is not a good political play, but it just shows the level of desperation that exists in the Biden administration, where they have to use Zelensky to play the we want you to release $60 billion to make Ukraine great again, but it's really about making America great again by reinvesting into the economy through these defense industries. Ain't America great? Go USA. I mean, in a way, it's a perfect thing that happened, because it just shows the absolute moral vacuum that exists with Ukraine policy, that the number one selling point that the Biden administration can make to the American people is that by releasing money, it's good for the American economy. I thought it was supposed to be good for Ukrainian democracy, but they don't want to talk about that because, that question that Mike Johnson and other Republicans had. So when you get the money, what are you going to do with the money? Well, they can't answer that question because they got beat and they don't have a plan. So you replace it with a new plan. Don't ask the questions about what the Ukrainians are going to do. Let me tell you what it's going to do for us here at home. 60% is going to be right here spent jobs program, because that's what they're talking about, a jobs program. But it's a jobs program that results in dead Ukrainians and a destroyed Ukrainian nation and an altered geopolitical reality in Europe that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah, and this fits nicely with the U.S. election as well, the way that all of this was framed. But just quickly to maybe end on this segment, given all that's going on with Zelensky internally in Ukraine, and also this visit to Washington was extremely cold. I mean, the environment around it was cold. The news reporting, the mainstream media, was not necessarily warm with regard to it. It wasn't a splash. It wasn't a celebration. It almost felt like an Oliver Twist scenario, the Kiev beggar coming to kind of try to get his porridge, and all he got was, a $200 million, get out of the principal's office, kind of sum. So, is Zelensky going? I mean, how it feels like he's a marked man. He's really, it's only a matter of time. Do you feel like this could happen as quickly as prior to the November election? Because at this moment, another 11 months, 9 to 12 months is just, it feels like a long time for a conflict that's going in the direction it's going.
War is an extension of politics by other means. So if we're looking solely to the battlefield, we're not examining the totality of the problem set here. In the United States, we're seeing pushback by Congress for political reasons and economic reasons. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the kind of drawdown, the kind of expenditure that what's going on, these defense contractors, they're not making weapons that go to Ukraine. What Ukraine is asking for, what the Biden administration is doing, is they're looking for drawdown authority so they can take equipment from the U.S. military and release it to the Ukrainians and then reorder new equipment to replace that equipment. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're giving away, but given the disparity of costs today, we're giving away, what cost us $5 10 years ago to make. So here's my $5 can of Coke to Zelensky. But today, this can of Coke costs $9.33 to make. So here's your $5 can of Coke. Defense contractors, here's your $9.33 to replace it. I mean, we'll go bankrupt doing that. But that's what we're talking about, is that kind of equation. We don't have anything left to give, as Lloyd Austin told him. Told Zelensky, dude, we don't have the ammunition, and we can't produce it quick enough. There's no magic. This isn't Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, where we can bring out the Oompa Loompas and they can suddenly make things happen out of magic. No. Artillery shells. And I think most people probably saw the photographs that were floating around about the Scranton arsenal where they make these artillery shells. The way we make them now, we got a bunch of old guys, even older than me, who are in there, hand making these artillery shells the old fashioned way. And it's a slow, laborious, manpower intensive process. We don't have what the Russians have, which is a shiny new production line where you hit the button and bam, 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 out come the artillery shells, 1 million to a month, so that the boys on the front line aren't starving for ammunition. They don't have to go, boys, we only have 6 rounds of ammunition to fire today, so let's fire them carefully. It's, guys, find a target, empty the barrels, let's go. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are like, we got 5 rounds of ammunition. We got 20 tanks coming after us. pick the 5 you're going to shoot at and pray you get the best result. A lot of what's going on the battlefield right now, a lot of the advances the Russians are making is because Ukrainians have literally run out of ammunition. The battle for Advika should be far more difficult than it's turning into right now. It should have been another Bakhmut, where the Russians are going to pay for every 10 meters they advance in blood because Ukrainian artillery is raining down on their heads. What's happening now is the Russians are slaughtering the Ukrainians with artillery and advancing, and the Ukrainians can't shoot back because they got nothing. And if they lift their heads out of their hole, the little, first-person view FPV drone comes in and kills them. That's the other thing that's happening. Is the new face of warfare, guys. Anybody who went in when I went in, it ain't what I was. I don't know if I could survive on this drone battlefield because there's literally drones everywhere. And once they lock onto you, you're screwed. I mean, once one of these FPV drones says, "You're my target, I'm coming for you, baby," there's not much you can do. Now, if you have electronic warfare, you can try and jam them. The Russians have saturated the front lines with electronic warfare. They're taking down about 80% of the Ukrainian FPV drones. They're able to jam and bring them to ground before they hit their target. But if the Ukrainians, Poroshenko the former president did a pitch on CNN where he had a whole bunch of drones in the background. He said, "I have paid for all these drones and we're going to send them to the front. These are going to be the FPV kamikaze drones." There's a whole bunch of them there. Let's say behind him he had 2,000 of them. Let's say the Russians take out 80% of 2,000. That's 1,600. I'm a Marine. I'm pretty sharp on math on this one because it's round figures. That's why I picked them. 400 are left. Those 400 are going to kill Russians. Because once an FPV drone locks in on you, you're screwed unless you can jam it and bring it down. But if it gets through, if you don't have electronic warfare with you, that baby's coming in and popping you. And the Ukrainians are killing a lot of Russians using FPV drones. They're killing a lot of Russian equipment doing it. But for every one Ukrainian FPV drone, the Russians have 100. And they're literally just flying all over the battlefield. This is something out of a bad science fiction novel. I mean, guys who were trained for, conventional war the way I was, we're not used to walking. You can't, if you take a look at the Russians' advance on infantry, again, I'm looking for Marine Corps to style, so I'm looking for a fire team rush here, a squad here, company maneuvering there. And I'm going, that ain't there. I'm looking at like a handful of Russians coming here. And why? Because if you put that infantry platoon online, like I was trained to do, the FPV drones are going to come in and kill them all. And so the Russians, you can't do standard tactics this way. The battlefield has changed. You got guys coming in and, they're trying to suppress the drones enough so that this one squad can make it in, get a foothold in there. And then there's a drone unit operating in support that comes up and they're sending drones out ahead to dive into the foxholes and kill. Man, this is a different kind of war. It's a brutal, bloody kind of war that is using technologies that, we weren't thinking of 2 years ago. What's happening on the battlefield today in Ukraine was unimaginable 2 years ago. And you know what? We're not being trained right now to fight that war. I just want to put that out there, that what the Russians and Ukrainians are doing ain't something that we're ready to do. But the Ukrainians, their military is collapsing as we speak. They literally have got nothing left. And so the head of their ground forces, general whose name begins with an S, but I can't pronounce it, is saying that they have to make difficult choices pretty soon. They're going to have to withdraw, because if you take a look at the map of the front line, you'll see the front line comes down and you'll see a lot of bulges there. Let me move my hand over here. Bulge. The thing about a bulge is that's frontage that has to be defended. For instance, the Battle of Vika, that bulge there, the Ukrainians have shoved about 40 battalions into that bulge, when if they just pulled back and consolidated the line, they could hold that line with 5 battalions, freeing up 35 battalions to go elsewhere on the defensive line. And Ukraine has run out of troops, so they need those battalions. And so their general's saying, we got to pull back and consolidate the totality of this so we can free up the forces that we need to reinforce and to hold the Russians back, because we don't have any reserves left. We burned through everything. We've got nothing left. And so you're seeing this, you're going to see this consolidation, this withdrawal. But as you withdraw, the Russians are going to move forward with forces that have not been depleted, and they're just going to put this pressure. You're looking at the collapse. And I think that's what we're going to see. But the Russians have indicated that I had a conversation with a very senior Russian, and he made it clear when he spoke to me that he was not giving away national secrets. So I'm just saying that because what he told me was that you're probably looking at an assault on Odessa sometime in the April-May time period. But before you can take Odessa, you have to consolidate at Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk, Nikolaev, Kherson. So you're gonna have to make sure that all the area that you're fighting the Ukrainians right now, that they're pushed back to the Dnieper River, and then you can thin your lines there, and you can now come down and you can make this major push against Odessa to link up with Transnistria, which is that breakaway republic between Ukraine and Moldova. So the Russians are right now saying that they're looking at the final offensive against Odessa taking place sometime in April, May. So the Russians appear to believe that this war is going to be going on until at least that time. But remember, that's taking Odessa. That means that between now and then, there's not going to be a pause. We're all in the West hoping that there's going to be this operational pause, the frozen conflict.
Stalemate. Yeah, stalemate.
Yeah, stalemate. The Russians ain't doing no stalemate. They're going all out to push this defeated, depleted Ukrainian military back to a defensible position so the Russians can consolidate their forces to make the final push to Odessa. And I think the reason why the guy was telling me this isn't because I'm special. It's because the Russians have made the decision that I don't think I'm the only one who was told this information. In fact, because I know I'm not the only one, because there were some colleagues of mine, I think colleagues of yours, or people at least you know of, Larry Johnson and others, who were in Moscow recently, and they were briefed, same briefing. They were told the same thing. So the Russians are putting out there why. It's an indirect way of telling the Ukrainians, your best bet is to stop the war right now. Your best bet is to surrender right now. If you surrender right now, you might get to keep Odessa, although I doubt it, because Ukraine has used Odessa as a platform to threaten Crimea and the Russian naval base at Sevastopol, and Russia is never going to allow that to be sustained indefinitely. So I think Russia is going to take Odessa no matter what. But the idea is if you stop now, you're going to get the best deal you're ever going to get. But if you go on, if you compel us to go, we're taking it all, guys. And what I mean by all is we're taking all of Novaya Russia. Wherever there's an ethnic Russian, a significant ethnic Russian population, it will now become part of Russia, all the way through the Black Sea coast to Transnistria. And Zelensky right now is saying, I'm not negotiating. He's under the idea that he can still kick the Russians out of the territories where they're at. He doesn't understand that he can't hold the territories that he currently has, that Russia will recapture these territories. And if the war continues, they'll take even more territories, so that around 40% of Ukraine will become Russia by the time this conflict is over. So the Russians are looking at a military conflict that stretches out, but there's hope for the political collapse. War is an extension of politics by other means. So if there's a political collapse in Ukraine, this could be hastened. And so what is the timing of that collapse? Because your question was, could it happen, before Christmas, before the end of the year and stuff? I don't think so. I don't think that we're looking at the political collapse before Christmas. I do believe that as we move into January, February, March, leading up to when there should be a presidential election in Ukraine, that there will be increasing frustration. And as the Russians, right now, their victories on the battlefield are significant, but of a small scope. But if the Russians start making large advances, if Kramatorsk falls, Kupiansk falls, if they once again threaten Izium and move up to Kharkov, this is reversing everything that the Ukrainians accomplished in the fall of 2022, and this will create a political crisis. Plus, there's the fact that the Russians will continue to attack the Ukrainian energy infrastructure this winter. This winter is already tough. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the snowfall and the temperatures there. Don't let the mild temperatures here in the United States fool you. It's damn cold there. A guy sent me a photograph of the thermometer in Novosibirsk, minus 60, minus 60. Wow. So, that's a reality there. The Ukrainians, I think their society is in danger of collapsing before the military collapses. And I've already given you a time frame of the military collapse. I think Zelensky is out sometime late winter, early spring. I think he will be removed either voluntarily or through a Maidan 3.0 type military coup.
Yeah, and the United States, it seems, is feeling pretty primed that if it can do it legitimately, if it can do it with the kind of the focus on maybe a fresh start, that seems to be where things are going. Can we get a fresh start? Doesn't seem like Zelensky is going to be part of that. So I wanted to pivot to what's going on in Gaza. There have been, of course, numerous votes at the United Nations, UN Security Council. There was the infamous singular veto of the humanitarian ceasefire for Gaza, as Israel is now conducting another iteration, another round of its onslaught after the very brief truce. And then the UN General Assembly voted, and only 10 countries voted against the humanitarian ceasefire. Of course, there's always those islands that the U.S. basically owns and controls, and the big nays, those who oppose the humanitarian ceasefire. Surprise, surprise, the United States and Israel. You've been following the military developments in this conflict, which has seen just innumerable Palestinians killed and displaced, and horrific images of babies, being, found dead in schools, and Palestinians being kind of paraded around in order to enter further into Gaza. But what's the truth about how Israel is actually doing? Because now you have reports that Biden wants this to wrap up by the end of the year, and that there is an increasing rift between Biden and Netanyahu, which is a far cry from October 8th, 9th, and 10th. Scott, I'm going to kick it to you.
Well, first of all, we should understand that the Biden administration's always had a difficult relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. Biden was the vice president to Barack Obama back when Obama was running for re-election, and John McCain was his opponent. And if you remember that Netanyahu flew to the United States to address the United States Congress without the invitation of the White House, it was a politicized move to basically throw his weight behind John McCain in a presidential election, and that's an unforgivable sin in geopolitics. And so there's always been this rift between Biden and Netanyahu, and it's deeply personal, but it's also a policy rift, because the Biden administration, even though they have a tendency to say something but not adequately back it up with action, they have been articulating from the moment they came into office in favor of a two-state solution. And they've been putting pressure on Israel, and they've been putting pressure on Israel because of their interest in two-state solution to stop the very aggressive settlement program on the West Bank. Netanyahu's just thumbed his nose at the United States and ignored him. And so there's a parallel policy unfolding to this concept of pursuing a two-state solution, which was the full implementation of the Abrams Accords. The Abrams Accords, of course, being that negotiated by the Trump administration. I think it was brought into into play in 2020 before the election. The idea with the Abrams Accord is it gives lip service to a two-state solution, but the maps that they produced in support of it it's unsustainable politically. So nobody was seriously pursuing a two-state solution. What they were pursuing is normalization of relations between Israel and the Arab world, the Gulf Arab states in particular. And it's the Abrams Accords. So it's a series of agreements between Israel and Gulf Arabs. Israel normalized relations with Bahrain. They normalized relations with the United Arab Emirates, and they were in the process of sealing the deal with Saudi Arabia. And had they done that, and the Biden administration was aggressively pushing for this, it would have been the end of Palestinian statehood, because now nobody would be talking about Palestinian statehood. They'd be talking about a region transformed. Remember, Joe Biden at the G20 summit in India stood up and briefed as the cornerstone, the foundational policy initiative of his administration in this regard was the India Middle East Economic Corridor, where you have container ships sailing out of Mumbai going to Dubai, getting on a train, going from the United Arab Emirates through Saudi Arabia into Jordan into Israel, and then getting on ships going to Greece and on into Europe. So this connectivity between Asia and Europe through the Middle East was Joe Biden's big thing. And that could only happen if Israel normalized relations. And notice what nobody was talking about there was a Palestinian state. It was Israel normalizing relations. So that's where things stood. And so even though there was this policy disagreement about Palestine between Biden and Netanyahu, Netanyahu briefed this same plan, this India Middle East Economic Corridor, when he spoke at the General Assembly at the United Nations in September. He was up there bragging about the role that Israel would play in this. This was the vision that everybody had. Nobody's talking about now. That's dead. That's dead. What everybody's talking about right now is a Palestinian state. But the Israelis, Netanyahu, first of all, understand that he is the head of the Likud party. Now, there's been a lot of controversy lately about, from the river to the sea. I guess we're not allowed to say that. I hope I don't get you banned on any of your platforms. But what people don't understand is that Hamas, which was an entity whose creation was facilitated by Benjamin Netanyahu himself in the 1980s and 1990s, didn't invent that. The Likud party did. That the 1977 charter of the Likud party basically is, from the river to the sea, from the Jordan to the Mediterranean will be Greater Israel. Actually, they take it up to, the Tigris and Euphrates, and they go to the Nile. I mean, they want it all. No Palestinians are supposed to be Eretz Israel, the Greater Israel, the biblical Israel. That's the Likud's position. And I think there it is. Between the sea and Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty right there. From the river to the sea, baby. Western Eretz Israel. Please, people need to understand what Eretz Israel is. It's biblical Israel. And the Likud party will never give it up. And that's where we're at right now. So while the Biden administration is talking about a two-state solution, hell, everybody in the world's talking about a two-state solution. There was an interesting interview done in England. I don't know if you saw it, where Sippy, and I can't pronounce her last name, but she's the ambassador of Israel to the United Kingdom. And she's asked about a two-state. She says there will be no two-state solution. Israel refuses to allow it. Israel will not allow it. And not only that, she's saying all the Palestinians got to go. They got to go. They're done. They're finished. So that's where the Israelis are on this. So there's this big divide between the Biden administration and the Israelis, between the world and the Israelis. Israel is truly isolated right now, like they've never been before. And it's dangerous for them right now, because normally the pro-Israeli lobby has a lock on the American body politic, meaning that it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, only good things are going to happen for Israel from the Americans. That ain't happening now, because Israel has stopped being something that politicians look to and say it promotes us, it helps us. Israel is hurting the United States. That India Middle East Economic Corridor that was supposed to, Israel was supposed to it was supposed to help us compete against China's Belts and Roads Initiative. That was the whole purpose of it. Although I think you and I have talked about this before. The railroads in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they're supposed to make this linkage. China built them, and China would be the ones building, and they did the ports and everything. So it just shows the stupidity of the Biden administration. But the point is, they actually believe that in order to be relevant in the world today, we have to be engaging in a positive fashion with the collective, with the global South, with the developing world, with I guess you take the G7 out of the G20 with the G13. The non-G7 members have to be on our side. We lost them all, and it's hurting us right now. We are in a horrible position geopolitically on a global stage. And for the first time in modern times, Israel is seen as a detriment to America, that Israel is hurting America, which means that the Biden administration has got to divorce itself from Benjamin Netanyahu and his far right-wing coalition, governing coalition, which is even further to the right than the Likud party. These are fanatics. These are nuts. These are guys openly advocating genocide, the mass slaughter of Palestinians. So the Biden administration has basically said, you got to go. They got to go. And you can't keep doing what you're doing in Gaza. You got to stop dropping bombs on civilians and all this stuff. So they've given them, I think, till the end of the year to wrap up their military campaign. But here's the bad news for the Israelis. You could have 20 years to wrap up your military campaign, and you're still going to get your butts kicked, because you are getting your butts kicked right now. You know, if you look at a couple things, the Battle of Iwo Jima, big Marine Corps battle. We stormed an island where the Japanese had dug a whole bunch of tunnels in the Mount Suribachi and underneath along the whole island. And so the Japanese were underground as the Marines are advancing above ground. And the Japanese would pop up here and there and pop, 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 kill Marines. And they killed a lot of Marines. I mean, we won that battle, but we lost a lot of Marines. It was a very bloody battle. Nothing easy about it. But that was smooth, flat desert. And the Japanese are still popping up and taking us. Now, let's take Stalingrad, where, you know, if you look at the fight for Red October Factory, for instance, the Germans came in and they bombed it into rubble. And then the Red Army came in and dug into that rubble. And the Germans brought their best combat engineer troops to do the final assault, and they got slaughtered because the Red Army was just dug in. You couldn't dig them out. Look at Monte Cassino, the battles in the Italian Alps, where we leveled an ancient abbey, flattened the village, and the German paratroopers just dug in, and they withheld massive assaults by the Americans, by the Poles, by the New Zealanders, by the British, the Indians. Everybody tried to take it. They couldn't because they're dug in. Now you combine the two. Combine a collapsed urban environment with tunnels underground, but not just a couple tunnels, 500 kilometers worth of tunnels. And so as the Israelis advance in, Hamas is just waiting for them, popping up, pap, 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 pap. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. Over 100 Israeli soldiers have been killed by Hamas so far. And that's not a huge number. I mean, it's a big number, but it's not a huge number. The number you have to pay attention to is the 5,000 wounded, because normally you're looking at, wounded, a 1 to 3 ratio. So for every dead guy, there's 3 wounded. But here you got 100 dead guys, 5,000 wounded, over 2,000 of whom are permanently disabled. These are guys who have no legs, no arms, spinal injuries. Their brains been garbled. They're going to be pooping into a colostomy bag for the rest of their lives because their guts got ripped out. I mean, this is the reality of this fight. And the Israelis are scared to death. It's not being widely reported here in the West, but they are withdrawing from areas in Gaza because they can't hold it. The Hamas is just taking them down. They're not succeeding. They're scared. They got guys, they've had to relieve battalion commanders because the battalion commanders refused to advance, refused to fight. They had to fire them, kick 2 of them out of the military. The battalions themselves are saying, we don't want to do this. The best battalions, like the Golani Brigade, are just getting the snot kicked out. They just lost a battalion commander right now. He's dead. A lot of officers are dying. Heavy percentage of officers. Because why? Because the enlisted men, these reservists, these fat, stupid, lazy reservists who don't know how to fight, don't have the motivation. So what happens is the officers have to come forward and lead them aggressively. And when the officers lead them aggressively, bam, they die in high numbers. And then you got to replace them with what? The Israelis are getting slaughtered. They're getting butchered. They're not winning. And so when Biden says you have until the end of the year to wrap this up, the Israelis are like, we can't do this. This is why in the war cabinet for Netanyahu, he can't take anything to a vote. For instance, they just debated whether or not to have a ceasefire to begin the process of hostage release again, because that's a big political hot button in Israel right now. Netanyahu is against it. He doesn't want to do it. If he put it for a vote, he would lose because all the others are saying, "Nah, man, we're getting our butt." The military is going, "Boss, we ain't winning this. we ain't going to win this. We need to stop this because it's humiliating us. When the world becomes aware of that the IDF can't win this fight, the notion of our superiority and supremacy will be shattered forever. But Netanyahu does it. The thing about the hostages is interesting because it turned out, I think we've talked about this before, but we got in a lot of trouble, at least I did, because I was somebody who said, that what Hamas did on October 7th was a military raid, not an act of terrorism. It was a well-executed military raid. No, it was an act of terrorism, Scott. 1,200 innocent Israelis were slaughtered by Hamas. No. Fully a third of those were
Don't
soldiers.
tell Piers Morgan that.
I'll tell Piers Morgan head to his face. I'll say it straight up. So close, I'll be spitting on him when I speak if he wants. But the point is, a third of them were military, which means that Hamas kicked the living snot out of the Israeli military that morning. But the rest of them, they weren't killed by Hamas. And the Israelis have finally admitted it. And I'm not talking about admitting it on the periphery, where you have a hostage, being released saying, no, man, they fired in the building. They killed everybody. It was the Israelis who did that. Or Apache helicopters appeared and they just indiscriminately killed everything. The official Israeli government report is, yeah, we probably killed most of those people, but we don't want to investigate because it would be too harmful to the psychology of the Israeli nation at this time to know the truth. So we're shutting this thing down. We're not going to talk about it anymore. But I'm here to tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, that all those party revelers, they weren't killed by Hamas. Some of them were, of course. I'm not pretending that Hamas didn't kill anybody. They did. But the majority of them died in a crossfire between Hamas and the Israeli police, where the Israeli police fired indiscriminately into the mob. They panicked. They brought in the helicopters, and the helicopters flattened everything. Hamas, the fight, they didn't discriminate. And when the Israeli army finally pushed into the kibbutzes, and you had hundreds of Israelis in their houses, held hostage by Hamas fighters who, for the most part, were prepared to exchange the hostages for their freedom, the tanks fired into the buildings and killed everybody. The Israeli army killed 80+% of the Israeli civilians who died on October 7th. And that's the God's honest truth, which again underscores the incompetence of the Israeli military and the political problem that Netanyahu faces. They were releasing hostages. They had that 6-day pause, and hostages were being released, exchanged for prisoners, etc. And then they stopped. Since then, Israel has recovered the bodies of 2 hostages who appeared to have been killed by the Israelis. They launched a hostage rescue mission to get a 3rd guy. It failed. The hostage was killed by the Israelis in this, who lost a couple of their elite commandos in the process. And so now the hostage families are going to Netanyahu saying, wait a minute, did you implement the Hannibal Doctrine against civilians? The Hannibal Doctrine, of course, being the notion that Israel will kill a soldier before they allow that soldier to be taken prisoner by a terrorist organization, Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. Hannibal Doctrine. So it's pretty tough. So here, give you an example of real life stuff, guys. Hamas went in and they captured an Israeli intelligence facility. That was where the Israelis had their human intelligence capability right there on the guy, because they never thought Hamas was coming over. So they kept it nestled right up there. And so all the servers that have all the names and the contact information and the history of reporting of all the human intelligence assets inside Gaza, and the case officers who run these guys are right there in that building. And Hamas captured it. And they took all the servers. That's why the next day, a whole bunch of Palestinian informers were dead, because Hamas went, you've been spying for Israel? Pop, dead. The Israelis went blind, which is another reason why their military campaigns suffering, right? Because they don't have any intelligence. They lost everything. They lost the human intelligence. They lost the SIGINT, because the 8200 unit was likewise attacked. Their servers taken. But these guys captured some of the case officers, the guys, the spy runners, and they're moving them into Gaza. And the Israelis are going, kill them all. And so they were sending their helicopters and everything in to stop this guy, literally slaughtering Israeli civilians because it's indiscriminate. They said, kill everybody because we can't let Hamas get their hands on these people. The Hannibal Doctrine. Israel lost control of the Gaza defense belt, and they lost control, custody of their own people. So the Israeli military was implementing the Hannibal Doctrine, full broad spectrum on everybody. They killed everybody because they couldn't allow Hamas to capture these people. You know, all those Israeli soldiers, the females right now, you have the Israelis saying they're holding on to female hostages. Dude, they're prisoners of war. They're women who worked in the Combat Intelligence Corps. They primarily come from a battalion called Unit 414. These are the wall watchers. These are the girls that sat there at the computers and watched all the imagery. They had the remote control cannons that could fire. And sadly, they weren't issued any weapons. So when Hamas broke through and came into their base, all these girls could do is run into a room. And there was a video. It's a very sad video because you're watching this, and these are girls in their night clothes, in their underwear, and they're just sitting and they're scared to death because it's boom, 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 and Hamas is coming closer. And what happened is Hamas came in, threw in grenades, and killed about 80% of them. So all those beautiful young women who were there, they're dead, they're wounded. The survivors were captured, taken in. These girls know how Israel spied on Hamas. So Hamas is getting great intelligence from them. And so Israel's saying, you got to release them. And Hamas going, they ain't getting released. They're soldiers. You know, they're these aren't, you know, this isn't Ma and Pa and the little kid that we took as a negotiating chip. These are soldiers, and you're going to pay a heavy price to get them back. And so you put all this together and you see the total untenable position that Benjamin Netanyahu's in. And now we add to it that Biden has told Netanyahu, not only will you stop doing what you're doing by the end of the year, but you got to go. And this is something that Biden has told Netanyahu. Your government at a minimum's got to go. We can't tolerate these people anymore, and you've got to go. Benjamin Netanyahu is operating on a 4% approval rating. And that number is going to be even lower now that the truth's come out about the Hannibal Doctrine and the fact that the vast majority of those civilians killed on October 7th were killed by the Israeli military. He's finished. He's done. And this is the reality. When the new year starts, we're going to be probably dealing with a new Israeli government that's going to have to accept the reality that Israel's isolation, that Netanyahu's foisted upon it by, you know, this ridiculous campaign, this mass murder, this genocide, has become America's isolation, and America won't tolerate it anymore. And we're going to see the necessity of Israel to form a government capable of accepting the inevitability of a Palestinian state.
Yes, and Scott, I wanted to get your comments further on some developments that it appears the Defense Department, the State Department appear to be very concerned about, and maybe even quietly panicking about, which is the situation in the region as a whole. So you have the Red Sea, you have Yemen's armed forces led by the Houthis, essentially conducting regular captures, strikes. Norwegian vessels have been hit, French vessels. There have been many targets thus far, and some vessels have actually been captured. And then you also have a situation, I'll pull up the report, in Iraq. And the resistance, what's called the Islamic resistance in Syria and Iraq, have been quite active as well. So let me just pull this up. So here's a report from the Associated Press. Iraq scrambles to contain fighting between U.S. troops and Iran-backed groups. This is what they always say. They're Iran-backed groups fearing Gaza spillover. But essentially, it's the resistance in Iraq and Syria, which have committed dozens and dozens of attacks on U.S. installations, bases, etc. So this appears to be more and more of a concern for the United States side. What is your I guess, assessment of this particular aspect of the conflict, the regional situation in particular, how Yemen, how these resistance forces in Iraq and in part Syria, and of course just broader regionally, how this has been playing out, and how does it affect the military situation in the conflict overall?
Well, let's start with Yemen and the Houthi. First of all, let's just make it clear that while Iran has Iran, I apologize if I've mispronounced that. I'm American, so it is what it is. I don't mean any insult by it. But the Iranians have been, they create something called the axis of resistance. And, it stretches from Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, through Syria, into Iraq with the pro-Iranian militias, Iran, and then down into Yemen with the Houthi. And Iran, provides, and I guess Hamas is thrown into that now too. And Iran provides financial resources and in some cases direct military assistance. With Yemen, there's no doubt that Iran has been providing Yemen with the resources necessary to take on Saudi Arabia in a war by proxy, ballistic missiles, drone capabilities, etc. But the Houthi do what the Houthi want to do. It ain't like the Houthi say, oh, big brother Iran's got to tell us what to do. The Houthi woke up and said, screw it, baby, we're going to war. We're fighting in defense of the Palestinians. And Iran's going, no, don't. We're trying to manage this escalation here. We don't want you. But the Houthi are the wild boys of the Middle East, and they're just like, yeehaw, go. And they start firing missiles, they firing stuff. And now they've done something that really hurts, is because this, I guess it's a Strait of Al Babel or Manbel, I can't pronounce it, but the little narrow thing on the, where the Red Sea comes into the Gulf of Aden, there's a narrow little passageway where all the ships have to go through, and they're in the range of everything the Yemenis have. And the Yemenis have said, as long as Israel's doing what they're doing in Gaza, no shipping will be allowed to go through if it's heading to Israel. And they're sink. I don't think they think they've sunk stuff, but they've hit stuff, put it on fire. They've captured stuff. And so now what's happening is that, ships are very expensive, and the owners don't like their ships to catch on fire or be captured. And so they're diverting all the way around Africa, coming in the other way to get to Israel. And that's very, very expensive. It's costing Israel tens of billions of dollars of denied economic activity. And so the Houthi are actually very sophisticated here. This is a very sophisticated weapon that they've dealt the Israelis. And the United States is going, damn it, now we got to respond here. But if we respond there, we got to take those forces and move them here. And remember, we've already said we don't have any money for this. All those aircraft carriers that we deployed to scare Hezbollah, it's basically eating up the Navy's operational budget, meaning money that was supposed to be set aside for training and other things is now being spent on these operations, which means there's no training taking place. There's other things that aren't happening. And now you want to expand naval operations into this area. Where's the money coming from? This is why the U.S. Navy is calling up the Australians and saying, hey, get some of your ships up here right now. We need you to take care of the security. And the Australians are going, no, we're not going to do that. This is a problem for the United States because we don't have the force structure to do everything at once. And so the Houthi have dealt a huge blow, not only to Israel, but to the United States. And the only way that we could rectify this is to go to war against them. But the Saudis have been using American-provided aircraft and American intelligence since 2014, and they haven't beat the Houthi yet. And then again, who's going to pay for this? Where's the money coming from? We're going to have another war in Yemen, a forever war. None of these wars have gone well for us. And if we go to war against the Houthi, the whole region's going to blow up. The axis of resistance will just go haywire. These militias that are firing against American forces in Iraq and in Syria, believe it or not, are holding back. They could do a lot more. They're simply reminding the Americans that they're here and that there will be price to be paid so long as this conflict goes on, that nothing is free. And what has the United States done? We've responded very minimally. We've bombed a couple warehouses associated with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command, but we've bombed those warehouses before, I guess Abu Kamal across the river from Al Qaim. We've been hitting that place, the same place over and over again. It's like the Iranians go, okay, rebuild the warehouse so America can bomb it next week, kind of thing. We're not doing real harm on the Iranians because we don't want to. If we do real harm on the Iranians, then they get involved. And now we're talking about an expansive conflict, and we only got 2,000 guys in that region. That ain't a lot of guys. And if the whole region blows up, those 2,000 guys can be swamped. They can be overrun. And now we have to divert all our air power into that area. Again, who's going to pay for it? We don't have a budget for this. And now we're doing that. And this war gets out of control, spins out of control. This is a nightmare scenario for the Biden administration. And if it blows up enough, because another area that everybody's worried about is what's going to happen with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has done a masterful job of escalation management. They have been, I mean, it's like the Israelis, are sitting there in this boxing match with Hamas, and Hamas split the eye, and Israel's bleeding here, and Hezbollah is just sitting there once in a while going, "Let me rub some salt in that wound for you. Come on, get out of here." And they get salt in that wound. Stop it. Hezbollah is just sitting there pissing them off because they're really, really putting, and it's hurting them. Remember how sophisticated I said the Houthi were? Understand that most of what Hezbollah is doing against Israel is economic in nature. Yes, they're taking down Israeli troops. They're destroying a lot of Israeli tanks, a lot of Israeli infrastructure. But what they're really doing is terrorizing the north so much that 70,000 Israelis had to be withdrawn from the northern settlements and resettled in temporary accommodations. That ain't free. That ain't free. It's costing Israel billions of dollars. And that 70,000 who, they had jobs up there, which means they're working, they're producing, there's taxes, the economy kind of stuff. They're here now. They ain't working. They ain't producing. They're just sucking up resources. It's a huge, huge, giant, gutting of the Israeli economy. The same thing out of what Hamas is doing in the settlements in Negev. People tens of thousands had to be relocated. Man, this is a giant hole in the Israeli economy, and it's unsustainable. On top of that, 300,000 reservists. You know what a reservist is? It's a working man. It's a guy who has a job. He has a family. He is participating in the Israeli economic experience. And now he's not. Now he's in the reserves where he's getting a paycheck because they have to pay him, but he's not producing anything. That job is gapped. Whatever he was doing in the Israeli economy ain't happening right now. And billions of dollars. So what Hezbollah is doing, what the Houthi are doing, the economic impact on this is destroying the Israeli economy, destroying it. And this is unsustainable for Israel. So this alone is prompting the Israelis to say, we have to resolve this fight. You got people like Gallant. I think he's the Minister of Defense right now. What a character, with his genocidal talk. But he's talking about we're going to take it to them. Gallant knows, though, and so does the Israeli Defense Force, that if Israel were to open up a second front against Hezbollah, that Hezbollah will take Galilee, that northern Israel will fall. Because Hezbollah's got 80,000 guys. Many of them, most of them perhaps, are combat hardened. That means they've been fighting in that, the Syrian conflict. These guys know war. They're very well trained, very well equipped, very well motivated, and they have a plan. If you think the Hamas plan that was executed on October 7th was innovative, you haven't seen anything yet. Hezbollah has a plan to take northern Israel, and they will take northern Israel, and there's nothing Israel can do to stop it, which is a nightmare. So nobody wants escalation. So in a way, because we can't afford to escalate, the United States can't afford to escalate, Israel can't afford to escalate, you make it even, you give the people who are putting the pressure on you even more latitude because they know you don't want to escalate. So they're going to push the envelope even more and create more and more pressure. And that's what's happening right now. This is the untold aspect of this war, but it's this aspect that's probably going to promote, the collapse of Israel more so than just Hamas defeating Israel in Gaza.
Yeah, and maybe lastly on this, do you feel like the confluence of these various aspects of Israel's brutal onslaught and what it's produced, both in its troubles with fighting Hamas on its own terrain, and the fact that that there is an axis of resistance that has been managing a conflict escalator that is prepared to move up. Do you feel like, given that Biden has given this deadline, that Israel will actually follow it? Because Israel's capacity for rational military and political behavior, especially since the aftermath of October 7th, appears to have diminished nearly to non-existence. I'm curious on your thoughts about that.
I mean, it's a tough political question here in America because of the control that the Israeli lobby has over everything. Congress, the presidency, the media, the spin. So it's an uphill struggle to get America to, change its policy regarding Israel. In the past, it was Israel can do no wrong. We support Israel no matter what. But we're now paying a price for that. And so I do believe you're going to see pressure being put on Israel. I think Netanyahu is finished. I think he's going to go. I think Biden is going to make it clear that continued American support of Israel is contingent upon a change in the Netanyahu government. We pretend that it doesn't mean Netanyahu is going to go, but if you dissolve this right-wing coalition, then Netanyahu can't continue as prime minister because it's consensus-driven. He has to get a ruling coalition. He won't be able to. Somebody else will step in and take over, and that's what we want. But here's the danger of all this, Danny. Here's the problem. And we got to be honest about this, because right now we're being lulled into a false sense of complacency. Hamas is kicking ass. There's no doubt about it. Hamas will not be defeated. But who likes Hamas? Does Egypt like Hamas? Nope. Does Jordan like Hamas? No. Does Syria like Hamas? Not really. They were just at war with them a couple of years ago. They tolerate Hamas. Turkey? Yeah, Turkey likes Hamas, but not that much. Not enough to go to war for them. And the further we get away, you realize that Hamas is very unpopular. And if we just erase the term Hamas and insert the term Palestinian, let's be honest, nobody cares about the Palestinians. There's a whole bunch of demonstrations taking place right now, but these are cause-effect demonstrations, meaning that if it weren't for the slaughter of the Gazans, these demonstrations wouldn't be happening. These people aren't going to go into the streets and demonstrate on behalf of a two-state solution or a one-state solution or a free Palestine. They're demonstrating because the bombing's happening. So what happens when the bombs stop falling, when the genocide stops? Are these people going to continue to be out there putting the pressure on the United States? Is the United States going to continue to feel isolated, or is it going to go back to what it was, where people say, wait a minute, so they've stopped, we don't have to turn on TV and look at dead Palestinian babies anymore? Oh, thank God. So let's get back to what we were doing, which is chugging along with normal economic activity where the Palestinians are problematic. We don't want to do it. And so the danger here is that all the sacrifice that the Palestinians have made, and believe me, they are making the suffering they're doing through, and you see there's a growing recognition amongst them that they have to do this. This is their burden to pay to get statehood, that all of that will be for naught, because there will be a desire to, we don't want to embarrass Israel. We don't want to humiliate Israel. We're going to look for a compromise solution where we have a moderate Israeli government who will return to giving lip service to, reviving Oslo, but never really being serious about reviving Oslo. And gradually the Palestinians will be forgot again. I'm afraid that's the direction that we're heading. And so, it's imperative that the international community find a way to sustain this pressure, because change will happen, because the United States feels the pressure. I mean, when we start turning on Israel, the pressure is working. All right. But the problem is, let's say we get Israel to change, the fighting stops in Gaza, now the United Nations comes in with their, because the UN doesn't like the Palestinians either. I mean, nobody likes the Palestinians. They've been getting screwed by everybody forever. And so you start turning it over to these old institutions, and it's forgotten. The only one out there articulating right now for the Palestinians seriously is Iran. And here's where the hope is. Because Iran has good relations with two nations who are the nemesis of the United States in the geopolitical arena, Russia and China. And Russia and China have historically kept sort of a hands-off approach to the Palestinian issue. But I think Russia and China, I think they do care about the Palestinians. There's a genuine concern. You see, Putin articulating things that no Western leader has ever articulated about what Israel is doing, criticizing Israel. And China's talking about getting engaged. And it's in China's interest to take advantage of what's going on to expand. Because what is Gaza going to need? Infrastructure development. Who's pretty good at that? China. So it's an opportunity for China. It also, if you keep pushing the necessity of a Palestinian state to resolve this Arab-Israeli conflict, you keep putting pressure on the United States too. What the United States wants to do is quickly get back to, even though Biden says that we won't be returning to October 6th, I guarantee you all the U.S. wants to do is get back to October 6th. That's all we want to do. We're not looking forward to any of this innovative political stuff in the Middle East. It scares us. Russia and China, on the other hand, are looking forward to something like that. So I'm not giving up hope for the Palestinians, but I am saying that all this stuff that we're seeing, all this pressure, these votes at the UN, that can disappear that quick. And you know it. You know it can, because we're not talking about, a deep foundation of love for the Palestinians out there in the world. We don't like seeing dead Palestinian kids. So people are rallying to the cause of Palestine. But when the kids stop dying, will that support for Palestine still be there? And that's the big question.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big question, and I share your sentiment about where the hope is, because yes, Iran is indeed a very serious actor when it comes to supporting Palestine. And I think you're exactly right. Both Russia and China, when it comes to this region, see the Palestine question as both one of course, standing for international law. That's what Russia and China like to do. They like to promote it because it's within their interests. Most stable, rational countries who are thinking about both their own development and what's good for the world in terms of their own development. It's stability. It's peace. It's not having this massive conflict, which could lead, that's genocidal in nature, that could lead to a very hot war between most countries in the region. That is an ultimate disaster for Russia and China. So, of course, this Palestine question is so important to not just stabilize, but also, Russia and China are the only countries outside of the region for the most part, outside of some outliers that don't have the same kind of influence. But the biggest countries that do support a Palestinian state and legitimately do, not giving lip service like Blinken does when he says we're for this two-state solution, and then green lights the absolute eradication of it that Israel is pursuing. Both Russia and China actually do support this.
Yeah, and we are living in an age of geopolitical transformation. I mean, it sounds very academic. It sounds like geopolitics 201. Your junior level course in college for that international relations degree. But it's real and it's happening, and it's in many ways it's exciting, but in many ways it's scary. Because we collectively, the world, have for so long grown accustomed to American hegemony. We can talk about how we're opposed to it, and everybody's like, we're against American imperialism. We're against hegemony. We're against the rules-based international order. Of course you are, except you're not, because you are for stability. And while there is a whole bunch of instability in the world out there, there's a whole bunch of stability that's brought about by this. And people are lulled into a false sense of complacency by the perception of stability. And right now, where this transformation that's taking place from the American singularity to this global multipolarity, BRICS and all that stuff, it scares people because it means you have to put your faith and your trust in something else. Now, if you're somebody who has been disrupted by the American singularity, yeah, you're ready to jump ship. But if you're somebody whose life has been chugging along in relative comfort, it's a scary proposition, a frightening proposition. So it's not, automatic logic where people say, well, America's failed, so we're going to jump on the Chinese and the Russian ship. Well, for many places in the world, America hasn't failed. We didn't get to be number one because we're a bunch of losers. Okay, we did some things right and we bullied our way to the top, whatever you want to say. But America is a very powerful nation that has a lot of successes attached to it. And a lot of people around the world found those successes attractive, especially the political and economic elites who make money off the American singularity. And so this idea that we're just going to seamlessly transfer power over to the Russians and the Chinese, that ain't going to happen. This is a very scary time. And it would be scary if this transformation was taking place in a conflict-free environment. But now we start throwing in the not only the reality of war, but what's that biblical statement? Rumors of war. There will be rumors of war. There will be wars and rumors of war. So we have real war, but we have rumors of war too. Potential of conflict that is generated by the friction that comes from this transformation. It scares the crap out of me. And I think it scares the crap out of just about anybody who's out there because, is the United States willing to go gently into that good night? Dylan from Dylan Thomas here. Or are we going to rage against the dying of the light? And my fear is that we're going to rage, and we're going to lash out, and we're going to create problems. We're going to make as much friction as possible rather than doing the smart thing, which is to smoothly transition and take an important seat at the table of multipolarity. We're going to resist that for as long as possible. And the consequences aren't just going to be economic and political disruption, but it can be, chaos and conflict as well. So as much as it makes sense for Russia and China to step into this Palestinian, crisis and be the leaders to get us out, it's just not that easy. America's not going to give up the role that it's enjoyed for the last, 40, 50 years as the lead influencer in the Middle East region. We're not going to, hand that mantle over to Russia and China willingly. So there's a lot of disruptive capacity out there, a lot of mischief for America to cause, going forward.
Yes, indeed, and perhaps we can close the program on this. You wrote a couple of articles in the last couple of weeks. One of them is for Energy Intelligence. You wrote about, is the U.S. still an essential nation? And you also wrote for RT recently an article about the U.S. military's multi-trillion-dollar fraud. And there were a lot of interlocking, very interconnected points about everything that you just stated. And so I wanted to ask you to close here, with regard to these developments. You are also trying to build a campaign, waging peace. You're trying to develop a film. And I'll pull all of this stuff up as you're talking. Given that the United States is spending so much on its military and all of its maneuvers and its leadership are committed to these maneuvers, point to a pretty disastrous conflict that you say with Russia, with China, and you also have this unresolved and with what's gone on with Israel's onslaught in Gaza, obviously still a very relevant point, the Middle East or West Asia. That is still very much a possibility of potential hot conflict. Given all of this, I mean, one, how do you feel like your film, Waging Peace, will contribute to, helping the United States become a more rational actor on the world stage? And two, uh, uh, where do you see this going? Do you see, because on the one hand we have the United States' belligerence is so clear for all of us, but on the other hand there are some pretty stark barriers. A lot of money being spent, not a lot of wars being won, and that could very well lead to massive changes in its own right. So I'll kick it to you while I pull up your materials.
Well, I'm I'm old school American, I guess I will say, is that I have faith in the system. I know if I glance over to the comments, I'm probably going to be eviscerated for saying that. How could you have faith in the system? How could you? Look, if I don't have faith in the system, if I don't believe in the potential of this country, then what the hell do I believe in? I mean, America doesn't exist. It's not, it's not a viable entity. And I'm not willing to go down that route. So I hold out hope that the American people will be able to be awakened by all that's happening around him. I wrote this article in RT, and one of the things I talk in there is about the fact that the United States has grown so accustomed to throwing money at the Department of Defense because we just assumed that if we funded it, then America will be able to win every war in the world. And what the American people are finding out is that not only could we not defeat the Taliban, not only could we not defeat Al-Qaeda, we can't beat Russia, China. We can't beat anybody. We can't beat Iran. We don't have the ability to do this. And yet we're spending all this money. And so I think there's a growing sense of betrayal. And the idea of, America being the essential nation, we can't be the essential nation when we don't allow ourselves to be essential. I mean, essential means useful. America is essential because you can't solve a problem without America there. But when America becomes the problem, we're not essential. We're the opposite of essential. We're disposable, and that's the world is finding out, especially because America's been operating with this our way or the highway concept. We sanction you if you don't agree with us. We go to war with you, but we can't go to war with you anymore because we can't win any wars because we don't have a military capable of winning wars. Sanctions don't work. And what the world's finding out is, hey, the world can function pretty good without America. In fact, the world probably functions better without America. And so America's got to change the way it's going. If we wait for the government to make this decision, we're screwed. The change has to come from below, from the American people. The American people have to become empowered with knowledge and information so that they can hold the people they elect to higher office accountable for what they do in our collective names, maybe elect better people who to represent us. And so ultimately it comes down to conditioning the minds of the American people, exposing them to new ways of thinking. And so the purpose of the Waging Peace documentary was to build upon the experiences that I had in Russia when I went on a book tour, 26 days, 12 cities, talking about my book, Disarmament at the Time of Perestroika, which is about the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty implementation of the late 1980s, early 1990s, arms control, and how we successfully implemented this during the height of the Cold War and part of this process of tearing down barriers between Russia and the Soviet Union, the United States and the Soviet Union, United States and Russia. It was a wonderful experience. And so I wanted to capture it and find a way to provide it to an American audience. And so I decided on making a documentary film and an accompanying book. And this is the Waging Peace project, and you can support it on the ScottRitterExtra.com. There's the ability, you see the ability to donate there. To make a documentary film, I made a documentary film in Shifting Sands back in 2001, 2002. It cost $475,000 to make. That's 2001, 2002 money. To make a documentary film today could be more expensive, depending. I mean, depending on the kind of film you want to make. We were hoping to get one that could be distributed widely, be seen by as many people as possible. That takes money. So any support people can give be deeply appreciated. The film's going to get made. If we have a limited budget, then we operate within a limited budget, and maybe we only do an internet release of the film. That, it is what it is. But the bottom line is to get something out there that can be used to, in this case, attack the disease of Russophobia. It's like a I don't want to say vaccine, gosh, that'll get me in trouble. It's an antidote to the poison of Russophobia. Russophobia is the fear of Russia. That fear is generated from ignorance. You're afraid of that which you don't know and you don't understand. And with the Biden administration out there talking about Putin, Chuck Schumer, Putin. It's as if this nation of 150 million people doesn't exist, this vast nation called Russia. So the idea is to get the American people to reimagine Russia based upon reality, not the fiction of the Biden administration or of the American government or the American establishment. It's a tall order, but it's necessary to promote what I'm really pushing, which is disarmament, arms control, the revival of a process that's designed to prevent the United States and Russia from committing nuclear suicide. Right now, the last remaining arms control treaty, the New START treaty, expires in 2026. Nobody's negotiating right now for a replacement treaty. What we're doing instead is building entire new families of nuclear weapons delivery systems, both in Russia and the United States. There's a new nuclear arms race taking place as we speak. And without arms control in place to control it, this could spin out of control to the point where one mistake, one miscalculation, the world's over. Goodbye. Das Vidania. I don't want that to happen. And so the whole Waging Peace project is designed to promote a better understanding of Russia for the purpose of furthering arms control and nuclear disarmament so that we all can live. That's a tall order by itself. Now we've complicated it because we got this fighting going on in Gaza, which has sucked the energy out of, the oxygen out of the U.S.-Russia conflict. It was going to be hard to sell that. Now it's, because, American audience is a lot like a bunch of little kittens with a laser beam in the room, and all I have to do is flick the laser beam over there. Now, oh, look at that. Oh, wait, and you get two laser beams going and damn, the cats go insane. And that's what's going on right now. We got two laser beams out there, U.S.-Russia relations in Gaza, and now a third laser beam's entering the scene. And that's, of course, China. And China's emerging role in the world, which again is happening. And America, I think we have a similar problem with China that we have with Russia. Sinophobia, the fear of China, the irrational fear of China, where we blame everything on the Chinese. And in doing so, we're missing out on what's really happening in China today. I had a fascinating discussion with Alex, the host of the show that I was on this morning, about the Chinese car industry. And all us Americans are like, we're Ford guys. I'm a Dodge guy. I got my Ram. I got my Ford 150. I kick ass. You guys do know that the Chinese produce like so many more cars than we do, and that their cars are really, really good. And I mean, come on, man. We are not the automobile capital of the world anymore. We used to be, but we ain't even close. The Chinese are producing cars for a consumer base that is, 1.8 billion people, I think, right? What's the population of China around there?
1.4, I believe.
Okay, I gave them 400 million more than they rated. 1.4 billion. We got 340 million. So they're literally, 3, 6, 9, 12. I mean, they're close to 4 to 5 times bigger than we are. And this isn't rural China anymore. That a bunch of guys in, straw hats, with oxen out there. It's a modern country with high-speed rail connectivity, airports with really great infrastructure, and a lot of cars. And this is a reality that's out there. It can't be ignored. We try to ignore it. We try to minimize it by being ignorant about China, about putting China down, being critical of China without really understanding why. So in some ways, the Waging Peace campaign has to expand. it's not going to stop me from making a movie about Russia. That's still going to happen. And it is happening. And the book about that is being written. But you can't stop there. You've got to address these other issues because they all are connected. You can't speak of U.S. Russian arms control anymore in a vacuum. You have to factor in China. You have to. How do you get the Chinese to that table? That's one of the great questions. Do we wait for China to turn their nuclear deterrent force from 200, 300 missiles to 1,500 so there's parity with Russia and China, so that now you can start talking about reciprocal withdrawals? These are discussions that have to take place, and if they're not taking place, then things are occurring in a vacuum, uncoordinated, and that's where miscalculations can lead, and we got problems. So I've created a nightmare for myself, is what I'm trying to say. That if I'm serious about doing this, and I am serious about doing it, it's a full-time damn job that's exhausting. But there are things worth getting exhausted for, and I think trying to create a better world for my children and, God willing, their children going forward is worth, every bit of effort that's being that I'm putting in and other people are putting in. I appreciate the support of everybody, you and anybody who contributes. It's greatly appreciated. I also recognize that, I'm not fighting this battle alone. There's other people out there like you who are doing God's work in trying to inform people about these issues. And if we can all find a way to work together, we might be able to get the American public to wake up before it's too late and empower themselves with knowledge and information and become the good citizens they're all capable of being. And good citizenship isn't just meaning knowing what's going on, but acting on it in a manner that manifests itself in a positive fashion in terms of governance. Get better people in office so that better decisions are made.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this is a good note to end on. I mean, what you said with the interconnection of all of these developments, and also the fact that, first, I think it's, it's a project in and of itself to counter Russophobia in the United States and maybe the larger collective West. That's a huge project, given the absolute ferocity that the U.S. and NATO-led political establishment are just so addicted to this, and spread it all the time through the mainstream media. But the fact that there is this positive element that often gets negated. It's getting negated too, of course, when there's so much suffering, like in a situation in Gaza. We miss maybe the point of why the suffering is occurring. It's not occurring just because Israel is unhinged and genocidal. It's occurring because they're genocidal because they truly are worried about the resistance that has brought back the whole notion of Palestine having any semblance of freedom, that there is this positive force even amidst all of the reign of terror that is being spread across this world by the forces we rail against all the time. And the same goes with, and of course on a much larger scale, with Russia and China. I mean, the things that Russia and China are doing, there is a lot of positive there. Not positive like, oh, we love it, we're so happy. Not like, oh, yay. But it's like it is bringing the human race to a better place in parts of the world that, the United States and the West do not have good reputations in. They don't have good reputations in Asia and West Asia or East Asia or the African continent or Latin America. I mean, these are places where the United States and the West don't have the best reputation for the majority of people. Maybe some, maybe some like these particular economic, political, and military arrangements. But for the most part, Russia and China offer a real alternative. And, and what you said about cars in China, when I was in Beijing 4 years ago, I learned about the whole policy of how do you get people in Beijing to not just drive cars. There's many cars in Beijing. How do you get them to drive electric cars? Okay, well, you make electric cars cheaper. You subsidize them. You make it so diesel vehicles are harder to purchase, and then you produce a whole bunch of electric vehicles, and then you sell them. That is how it happens. It doesn't sound so complicated, but it just takes real policy. But only peace can really allow that to flourish in places where we are being deprived, where Biden is literally doing all that he can to stifle the whole electric vehicle industry by reducing the export of key technology, by trying to strangle it. It's doing it with chips too. Gina Raimondo can't stop going off about the mouth about making sure that China doesn't get those advanced nanometer chips in order to build these phones. Too late. They're building the phones with their own chips.
Their own
And,
chips.
and the companies that produce semiconductor technology are probably going to like, regardless of where they are, the US or anywhere else, they're probably going to like a domestic a consumer base that can both buy the phones that use the semiconductor technology and a country that can produce it on its own. They're going to like being able to exchange technology because that's a huge market. And Gina Raimondo saying, no, give me more funding, the State Department, so I can continue, so I can strangle US tech corporations. It's insane. So this is what we're dealing with. The same with West, as we talked about many times, the West and sanctions on Russia. It's like, let's strangle Russia's energy economy, and Russia will just replace that with India and China while Europe is in shambles. I mean, we can go on and on and on. So it's a lot, but I appreciate that, any focus on Russophobia in a moment where there's just not a lot of it, not even on the anti-war movement across the political spectrum.
No, I mean, we are in strange times. Again, that old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. We do live in interesting times. I just had to laugh when you talked about, what was going on with Raimondo and chips. When I was in Russia, the people would just come up and say, "Hey, tell Joe Biden thanks." For what? For the sanctions, because the sanctions have liberated us. We now have a viable economy where oligarchs aren't stealing our money and taking it out to buy, football clubs in London. That money's being reinvested here in Russia, and we're experiencing this economic boom. And again, that's something that most Americans, don't appreciate. Again, you were in China. I've never been there. Maybe someday I'll have the opportunity to go there. But I think, if someone tried to describe China as a backward country to you, you'd say, nah, that's not the China I experienced. If people try to tell me that the Russians are just a bunch of, remember, the Russians have to steal washing machines to get the chips out so they can build missiles. Well, I'll tell you what, the Russia I saw, they very advanced society with a lot of technology, very knowledgeable people, very sophisticated people, very cultured people. Definitely not the vision of, it doesn't match the vision that many Americans have about Russia. So this ignorance is real. We have to overcome the ignorance. And again, I just want to thank you for everything that you do in that regard. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on here and have a conversation with you and hopefully help that process of informing people. Knowledge is power. So hopefully some people feel empowered by, what we've done here tonight. But again, thank you very much. And, we're heading into the holiday season. I don't know, how religious you are. If you are religious, it doesn't matter. The holiday season is more than just about religion. It's about peace on earth, goodwill towards men, and about, bettering the human condition. So happy holidays, and let's keep up the good work.
Sure thing. Yes, Scott. All right. Well, I'll let you go. I missed the Patreon questions, but for all of those who want to support Scott, be sure to go to, I put your Telegram link because you have it pinned. You have the Waging Peace Fund pinned on your Telegram, so you can find that in the video description. If you want to support this show, there's many links in the video description to do so. Patreon, Substack. You can be a YouTube member. There's one-time options like buy me a coffee. So go there. If you're feeling cheery this holiday season and you want to support some good works, that's where you do it. It's all in the video description for both Scott and I. With all that said, everyone, take good care, and I will see you all next time. Good night.
Okay.